the pace of change is just unprecedented at the moment, and that's probably actually quite a good thing, because it's forcing a lot of us to kind of make decisions that we'd been putting off before. So I think there are definitely smarter ways to make money in life than going into kind of selling cars, but there's real opportunity for those people who are willing to do things a little bit differently.
Financial markets are going to be under some strain after some of the challenges at the moment, and I think that's going to become even more challenging. It's going to be interesting to see what the OEMs do about it, because 10, 15 years ago, there were a lot of sponsored dealer programs about, whereby well-respected and quality operators were backed by manufacturers and funders to open up or acquire perhaps struggling businesses.
So we've done 12 videos in 6 weeks. We do 2 a week. Dash does the video on Tuesday, and on the Thursday, someone from the Exco does an update on various things. And that support and advice. There's some humour in there, but the advice isn't just about economic. It's about health and well-being as well, because we're very cognizant of the health and well-being of people during what is such an abrupt change of way of life.
As long as we are clearly following all of the social distancing guidelines, sanitisation, etc., etc. One person in allowed at a time, and that would be on an appointment basis. I struggle to see how that is being less responsible than allowing people to wander around a garden centre.
Hello and welcome. I'm John Hickey, and this is the Armchair Show, coming to you today from our quarantine studio. For those of you who are new to the show, it's all about the people in the industry who are doing great things and making sure they get the recognition that they deserve. And it's also about our mission, which is to help you to learn, prosper and grow. It's been a bit of a whirlwind since we launched the show back in February. We hit over 80,000 views in just our first 3 weeks, and then the world went and turned upside down. So here we are, improvising, giving it a good go, just like the rest of the industry out there. We're delighted today to be in the more than capable hands of our very own host, Mr. Mark Ellis. Mark, tell us who we've got on the show today.
Thank you, John, and welcome to my humble home studio. Really happy to say we've got 4 fantastic guests, of course, joining us remotely. We'll go straight over to Neil, first of all. Neil, who is a familiar face to the Armchair Show. Neil, how are you doing?
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Great stuff. I hear that you had to cancel something quite significant during this lockdown period.
What, my wedding? Yeah.
Just the wedding.
Didn't go down with the other half, but I wasn't that disappointed. No, I'm very, very disappointed that had to happen. It was a low-key affair, and it's been rescheduled for a year away. So
it was a fairly long time coming, the big day, wasn't it?
Well, if 19 years is a long time, I think it's about right, to be honest. But so I'll make 20 years. Anyway, enough about me.
We've also got David Kendrick on the line from UHY Hackey Young. David, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, thank you.
Chairman of Lindo Cricket Club as well, I believe.
Yeah, not much cricket being played at the moment, so yeah.
Fingers crossed. I'm sure you'll be back on it soon. We also have Richard Blumberger from Marshall Motor Holdings. How are you doing, Richard?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. Great to be here. Great. Yeah, it's interesting times, isn't it? It's we're all having to adjust to different ways of doing things, but I think by and large we're all adjusting quite well and behaving quite well. So let's hope we continue that and get out of it pretty quick.
Phil Jones from eBay Motors Group. How are you doing, Phil?
Yeah, all right. Probably like everyone, up and down in this very, very strange time.
Absolutely. Another familiar face. Obviously, you were one of our first guests on the show originally.
Yeah. It's great to be back. But yeah, I think I remember making New Year's predictions on the show, and you know, that aged pretty badly, didn't it?
We won't hold you to those. We won't cut them into this sequence. But Neil, we'll come over to you over to yourself first. Imperial Cars, it's grown from 6 to 17 sites in 3 years. What advice would you give to someone starting in the industry today?
I mean, as an industry, I've been involved in the industry at the sort of sharp end for 10 years. Prior to that, sort of support from a creative agency point of view, and then prior to that, from a transactional point of view, with supplying documentation to the likes of Volkswagen Group and Toyota and Nissan and whatever. It's a great industry, great people. I think for us as a business, if you're starting out as an independent, what it does give you is the flexibility to do what you want. And you can decide at that point to be sort of risk averse or risk taker. I think where we've been able to accelerate as we have in the last 3 years, it's down to taking decisions, sometimes wrong decisions, most of the time the right decisions, but we've been able to react to those decisions very quickly. We've been able to change the direction quickly, and we've been able to accelerate with the support of the partners and funders that we have. If I was to give any advice to anybody starting out in this industry today, I'd say think very carefully about it. It's a challenging industry, and I think year on year, accepting the current circumstances, it's getting more and more challenging to realise a reasonable profit. The margin is being squeezed year on year. Finance regulations definitely have to change, but it's another challenge that we're going to deal with once we come out of this. And I just think it's going to get more challenging as we go forward. I think there are inevitably going to be casualties that might, in a weird and awful way, really, it might allow the rest of us to survive if we're still there, because there'll be supply needs if there are casualties, or when there are casualties. But yeah, I just think it's a fantastic industry, full of great people, but it comes with a certain degree of challenge.
Yeah, Richard, you've been in the industry for about 18 months. Is that right?
Yeah, just a little bit less, but yeah.
Yeah, and you come from a pretty different industry, to be honest, from what I hear. You were previously in the construction sector, weren't you? What's your journey been like from that into the automotive industry?
Yeah, so my background supports services rather than construction, and I tend to go and end up in turnaround situations. So it was great to come into a company that didn't need to be turnaround, because actually it's growing and very strong. So I think I took the decision to join the to join the motor industry and sort of the relative new boy, but for my early observation, it's a great industry, and I think we operate with great brands, great relationships with the OEMs, and the product's fantastic, isn't it? The product's exciting, and the facilities that we sell the product in are amazing. So I think it's one that we should be really excited about, and people should be encouraged to come and join to join the industry. And I think we as an industry need to carry on evolving and developing, and we as Marshall are in a great place with sort of the growth we've been on, the strong balance sheet and fixed asset base, but we need to carry on that investment in customer journey, digitalization. We've invested large sums of money in our learning development, in developing future leader programs. We've got a great talent pipeline coming through, and we've invested massively in our apprenticeship scheme. 2020 actually marks 100 years anniversary for our apprenticeship scheme, and it's bigger than ever for us. So I think there's lots of positives. I could go on: diversity, inclusion. We're working hard as is the industry with the Automotive 30% Club, which my CEO Dash Gupta is the patron of, to increase that diversity and inclusion, which I really think will help encourage entry into the industry and break down some of the barriers that maybe the industry has from the outside looking in. So I think there's lots of positives.
Definitely. David, you head up a team that's responsible for over a third of all automotive retail mergers and acquisitions in the UK. Obviously, that gives you the opportunity to see a lot of different businesses and how they operate. Does what the guys have said so far, does it chime with your experiences?
Yeah, I think it's fair comments. I think one of the challenges for the industry and for people who do want to join it, I think it's fine at Richard's level where you're joining an exec board in a PLC, but I think at the entry level, it's very, very challenging for new people to come in. The cost of setting up these businesses is quite prohibitive for a lot of people. So if you are a general manager or a director in some of the larger groups, it takes some serious capital to get set up. And I think the guys at Imperial have done an amazing job, but I think, again, not mentioning the C word, but the financial markets are going to be under some strain after some of the challenges at the moment. And I think that's going to become even more challenging. It's going to be interesting to see what the OEMs do about it, because 10, 15 years ago, there were a lot of sponsored dealer programs about, whereby well-respected and quality operators were backed by manufacturers and funders to open up or acquire perhaps struggling businesses. And I think Richard obviously looks after Ridgeway within their portfolio now, and that's probably the greatest success out of one of those sponsored operators, kind of 15 years from a single site through to, I'm not quite sure how many it was at the end, but it was a well in excess of £100 million transaction. Wouldn't it be great to see some of those again? But I'm just not sure the appetite is there from the risk teams to back people. So it is a challenge. Finding those new young stars of the future is going to be really difficult for businesses, because it's a high pressure, low profit industry, and I think it is hard to attract people to it. That said, someone said to me, once you're in it, you'll never get out of it. And whatever it is, 18 years later, we're still here to tell the story. So,
absolutely.
It's challenging times, but I think there's still a hell of a lot of opportunity for good operators doing the business right.
Yeah, Phil, you've obviously got plenty of experience in this industry, and what's your experience been with the importance of education coming into the automotive industry? Well, let's break it up. So, thinking about traditional education, is it something that is still vitally important, do you think, to get into this industry?
I mean, I think so. I think a lot of the times education is a screening mechanism, right, for employers, because it kind of shows. Does it show intelligence? Not necessarily. It probably shows staying power and dedication for people to get through to certain things. It's very rare that your degree relates to the job you end up doing. I was a very nerdy kind of child, a big surprise to you, and did economics and management at university. I'm life and soul of the party. So I'm kind of in my dream job. But I think that formal education is more. It's interesting in that it opens the mind to how you think and being able to take in new sources of information. And, I think that's really important in the automotive industry. The thing that is common around the businesses that are thriving in these situations and will continue to kind of do well coming out is their ability to embrace change and look outside the industry. And, the people I enjoy spending the most time with are the ones who are trying to sort of push the envelope. You look at Neil, I say Neil down there, kind of underneath me on Zoom, is an example without the shackles of an OEM telling them how to run their business and what colour the grass needs to be outside the dealership. They've been able to take some real risks and do things differently. And the pace of change is just unprecedented at the moment, and that's probably actually quite a good thing, because it's forcing a lot of us to kind of make decisions that we'd been putting off before. So I think there are definitely smarter ways to make money in life than going into kind of selling cars, but there's real opportunity for those people who are willing to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, Neil, just picking up on a few things that we've been talking about. In your side of the industry, what's the biggest misconception about what you guys do? And that might sound like an obvious question, or maybe not an obvious question. I don't know. But what misconception is there about Imperial Cars, and how do you address that?
There's still a perception out there, and whether we like it or not, and whether we're doing everything we can to change that, there is still a perception that. Well, I suppose there's two perceptions. One is that used car retailers, used car dealers, dealers down the end of the road are there to really just maximise profit and rip off individuals wherever they can. And I think that's still, some of that still comes from the minders and the after dailies and all of that many years ago. I think the other perception is that we have always got a lot of margin in our cars. You constantly see on the market on Martin Lewis and things like that, always make sure you go in and negotiate hard. You'll get a deal. You're better off taking cash. Well, it's total crap. The fact of the matter is, our industry now, our profit in the chassis is probably as low as it's ever been for us as a business and as a retail operation. And that goes for everybody. We all work on very, very slim chassis margins. There is very little in the car. We're dictated, the market's dictated by not necessarily classifieds, but CAP, HPI, the value of cars at trade. And we have to work within those confines. And if we want to sell volume, we have to be price competitive. There's no option. really. So we were selling, forget the current period, we were selling 2,000 plus cars a month. To sell that volume, we have to be 97, 98% of market value to turn that stock quick enough. So there's no room to negotiate, no room to maneuver, but the perception still is, you'll get a deal. Now, a lot of the consumers that come into us are quite happy when they realise there is no need to negotiate. There is a fear amongst consumers that they're going to come in and have to go through a really hard negotiation process to get a good deal. We'll use all the tools at our disposal. We'll show Auto Trader market value. We'll show Car Guru's market value. We'll say, well, look, we know this is a well-priced car. Why are you asking us for £1,000 off? It's just not going to happen. This is the reason you're sat in front of us today is you've done your research. You obviously know this is a well-priced car. Let's move past it. And a lot of the time, the consumer's more comfortable having had that conversation. But I think that those are the two main perceptions, and we're constantly trying to change that perception around that used car piece, the way we present the vehicles on the site, the amount of detail we put into it, history of the vehicle. We want to answer all those questions through the website so that consumers have got the confidence to take that next step. But yeah, and to be honest, there are still some not very good operators out there in our market space, so they don't help the situation, But those are the things we've been battling with, I suppose, over the last 4 to 5 years, really. And as we've sort of built the brand and there's been more prominence to the brand and it's become a national brand, we've started to move away from that. And again, we've got aspirations to be seen in the same light as Marshalls, as OEMs, as franchises, because the way we prep our cars, the way we present our cars, the way we handle the customer experience is not dissimilar to that through the franchise networks.
Yeah. Richard, given the limited time you've had, obviously, within the industry at the moment, did you come into it with any preconceptions about it that were dispelled as soon as you came in?
I think my leaving card was an after daily card that when I left.
There you go.
And so I think that was that sort of exactly sums up Neil's point. But I didn't join the industry or Marshall thinking I'm going to go into a used car wheeler dealer place, because I think from my perception looking in, the industry had moved on. I think now I'm in the industry, I think there's still almost echoing the same points. There's still that distrust, which I think is a shame, because there's plenty of research out there that says buying a car is not a pleasurable experience for people. And that really gets me, And we're spending a lot of time at the exec discussing the customer journey and how we make that a better journey, because it should be an amazing journey, coming and buying an incredible product. So I think, speaking from myself and from Marshall, it's professional. We spend a lot of time around the compliance side, making sure that we are transparent to the consumer. And I think I heard Phil talk previously, if it wasn't you, Phil, I've just gifted you something for no reason, about the touch points and the hours that a consumer will research before they come in. So actually the customer coming in now is an intelligent customer. They may not go all the way through the journey and hit the buy button online, but when they come in, they pretty much know a lot more about the car. This is what we want, this is what we've researched, this is it, please. So that actually helps in a way, the transparency, because to Neil's point, the price, you've seen the price, you've seen the market. We've got a piece of software called Phoenix 2, which we're really proud of, in-house developed. We consider it to be industry leading, and we can turn the screen around and it can show people completely transparent, not just the price of our dealerships, but the market. So that if we're offering a price on a part exchange, well, that's there it is, and that helps build those the trust and the buying experience. But I think it's sort of back to what I said earlier as well. I think the whole diversity and inclusion agenda is a critical one here, because I think there's a misconception, although it's sort of true in part. It's a male dominated sales centric industry, and actually I don't think it is. I think maybe again to Neil's point, there are some dealers out there that maybe don't give it the best name, but the majority and a lot of the big independents and the big franchise dealerships are very professional, and we are very keen to drive the whole agenda to make it a more pleasurable experience. So I think almost forgetting what the question was now.
No.
I think it's better than I thought when I was looking in.
That's positive, isn't it? David, from your point of view, again, getting the opportunity to see lots of different businesses, what's the biggest challenge you think that dealers have at the moment?
People, I think, and I think perhaps an over-reliance on the OEM partners as well from a franchise perspective. Again, kind of prior to this scenario we find ourselves in, I think those businesses that have been very successful and well run have typically, linking in with Richard's point, stable teams that have been with the business a long, long time. And it's no coincidence that those businesses are very stable, very profitable and well run. I think that the challenge comes where some of those individuals are getting to the end of their careers, and it's trying to find those next stars within those businesses to come through. I think that, coupled with the ever increasing overhead requirements of these businesses and the interesting dilemma around the impact of online, I think that's going to become a very intriguing and evolving area moving forward, because some of the significant overheads that the businesses now operate from, which are, as Richard said, they're fabulous to go in, and it's an amazing consumer experience. If more people are going to be driven to online, and I think one thing that perhaps this whole situation we're in at the moment is teaching people that things are a lot more accessible and life can go on remotely. So there might be a slight fast forwarding of the consumer's behaviour because of the situation we've been in at the moment, which again will be interesting to see how that evolves. And I know there's some interesting stats being put out by Phil and some of the other businesses in that space at the moment with regards to traffic levels and that type of thing. But it's an ever-changing industry. But I think the people side of it probably is the key challenge that differentiates the good from the bad.
Absolutely. I think the people side is really important. We talk about that a lot on this show. Phil, I think we've spoken to you about this in the past, actually, on the first show that you came on. Obviously, there's been a fairly big acquisition on your side. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we joined the eBay family February last year. As David actually and all these chaps will know, that was kind of 18 months in the doing. So it kind of feels like a fairly big chunk of my life. And that's been huge, right? So we were, Motorstock.uk was founded by the Daily Mail Group. So we started in media, and then we were acquired by Cox Automotive. So we became Automotive. It's been fascinating, right? Because we've now actually got a network of automotive classifieds across the world. So Mobile in Germany, Kijiji Auto in Canada, US eBay, and Gumtree in South Africa and Australia, Automobile in Italy. We've got kind of a real global fraternity, and this has been a really interesting time to see those businesses come together and share insight and best practice. And eBay impressed us from the fore. They've been very forward thinking when it comes to people, and they've looked after our team fantastically. But I guess you never really know until kind of it really hits the fan. And we were really lucky that from the CEO of eBay, they made a decision that we were able to waive April advertising fees, and we've done some for part of May as well. And that was a huge decision to make, clearly out of any of my authority, but it was about doing the right thing for the customer. And yet it's a really strange period. It's really strange to watch this business we've helped build up over these years and combined with Gumtree and eBay Motors, and then suddenly see the revenue line just kind of deleted in Excel, basically. But it's doing it because we're trying to build a business that is there for the long-term future, and we passionately believe that we can help dealers. And this kind of misconception point that the other chap's been speaking around, I think we can help that. We understand how consumers are searching, and we understand what they want, but we also actually understand the dealer business, and we're doing our best to sort of play Cilla Black, and kind of marry these things together. And there is no doubt that the last couple of weeks have been unprecedented for that. So actually, with the benefit of our kind of global partners, in our classifieds division, we've got insight from consumers around what it is they want from dealerships. So why they're not buying, risk of infection, they want to test drive the car, what they want from the dealership. We're starting to get that insight, and we can actually benchmark that stuff between jockeys, and it's really illuminating. And I'm the luckiest man alive, because I've kind of got a new job without having to leave effectively, and it's super exciting.
And just lastly, how big a role has the culture of the business played in, but again, not thinking specifically about the time now, but certainly leading up to the lockdown and the normal business period, how big a role did the culture play?
Yeah, I mean, so it's the most fascinating, probably satisfying part of the job is working with the team, and I'm incredibly proud of the teams in Abingdon, Richmond, and in the field. And from a motorstock.co.uk perspective, we were always encouraging people to kind of be open to change. There'll always be new opportunities, and we're a challenger business, so we've always had to kind of be flight of foot, and that paid dividends when we were acquired by eBay. It's a very lot of kind of shared values there, but we had a team who went into that transaction excited and up for the change and up for taking on the challenge there. And culture is not something we create. We can only create the conditions for the people to thrive. Yep. And it's created opportunities for people, and people have thrived in that. And I'm really, really proud of that, because that's the stuff you can't do on your own. You need the teams behind you, and enormously grateful that we've got a great team back at base.
So 6 or 7 weeks in, I think it's part of the problem at the moment. No one knows how long the lockdown's been going on, but we'll say it's 6 weeks, 7 weeks. That'll do. It wasn't long ago we were watching news stories about toilet roll running out and what have you. How was it closing a business for a period that you've got no idea how long it's going to be? I can't imagine how that must have been to have to close your business temporarily. Neil, how was it for you? How did you prepare to close the business, not knowing when you'd reopen?
Pretty horrendous, really. The lockdown went out, I think it was on a Monday evening, wasn't it? And so we sent staff in the next day to housekeep and clear up and make everything as safe as possible. We have obviously got issues in these sort of times when we've got 43 million pounds worth of stock on forecourts, then we've got to secure that as best we can. But not only that, Phil alluded to it just before the break. We went from a company that generates 25 million turnover a month to nothing. So it's no one could ever have foreseen that, and no one could ever understand that was ever likely to happen. Even in the worst recessions, there's a drip of business still coming through the door. So I think for us, it was a real, for everybody, a complete and utter shock. And what do? The best thing you can do is you've got to shut up shop, and then you have to start really understanding and thinking about the implications, not only during the period that we're in lockdown, but I suppose the way we've kept going is looking at what we're going to do coming out of this, and all the discussions around, traditionally a very sales-centric business and maybe top-heavy, and consumers now definitely really into using Zoom technology and understanding the power and the benefit of that. The social distancing likely to go on till the end of the year. I think for us, the way we've kept going is looking, and that whole accelerated process. We've been looking at the way consumers want to buy cars for the last 3 to 4 years. Most of the presentations I do are around what we're trying to do to change that. But in the last 6 weeks, we've probably accelerated 12 months in terms of where we're going with that now. And that's what's kept us going.
Yeah. I think also, apart from looking ahead, it's about the day-to-day, isn't it? David, what's your day-to-day lockdown life like in terms of work?
It's the new norm, isn't it? So, yeah, camping in my office, basically, and trying to speak to as many of our clients as possible. So we have quite a significant automotive client base that the majority of people use us for accounts and tax advice and that type of thing. Obviously, the transactional work that we are heavily involved in has all come to a grinding halt, as you can expect. So there's nothing really moving in that space, and I'm not quite sure how long it'll take for that to get going again. But I think it was initially the conversations were very much around people taking action, like Neil mentioned, shutting down businesses. What are other people doing? There was a huge amount of noise that I hope I talk about again as to furlough and commission being included or excluded, which I think still remains a bit of a grey area. And then the last few weeks, it's been more around talking to people as to what does reopening look like, what does the remainder of this year look like, what does cash flow look like, and just trying to use our expertise and use some of the experiences that other clients are experiencing. So I think it's a time where the industry's actually pulled together really well, and kind of competitive advantage to some extent has gone out the window. It's about pulling together, sharing best practice and getting through this and having a pint the other side, hopefully. So yeah, I think sitting in your office every single day with a couple of kids running around downstairs has its own challenges, but actually it's become the new norm, I suppose. And it's not easy when the sun's shining, but as I sit here in Manchester and it's raining, it's not so bad today.
Richard, where are you focusing your efforts at the moment?
It's very similar. I mean, we made the announcement to shut our businesses the day before. So over the weekend, we put the announcement out, an RNS out on the Monday that we're going to shut our businesses. Then obviously the government announced a full shutdown on the Monday night. So we were in a very similar position. We were sort of slightly one step ahead as we'd made the decision. But it's still, an abrupt shutdown was never in anyone's business continuity plans or general thinking. Like a number of retailers, we've kept open a number of after-sales sites during this period for essential workers and vulnerable people for breakdowns, and we're really proud of that. It's the right thing to do. It's our bit to keep the nation going. We're running them at losses, but this is about when we see the Twitter feeds of the police cars, the ambulances, it gives you an immense amount of pride. But we, like everyone else, in the main, we're not opening for general servicing and the like, because we're only focusing on essential travel and safeguarding colleagues. So we've been through all that. We've had to secure our sites, £400 million of stock. There's a lot of stock out there that we need to make sure is safe and secure. And then the last few weeks, we've been turning our attention to reopening. And what that can look like.
What about staff during this time? How are you dealing with the staff morale?
Yeah, so I think it's really important for us. We've kept a lot of communications with our team. So we furloughed a number of people immediately. It's been said already in the call. Our revenue line goes from X to zero overnight. Clearly, we've got no revenue coming in. We're a heavily operationally geared business, so we utilised the furlough scheme as was what it was there to be used for. But we keep regular communications with our furloughed people and people who are working. We've got about 400 people working in the after-sales sites and back office functions. So we've done 12 videos in 6 weeks. We do 2 a week. Dash does the video on Tuesday, and on the Thursday, someone from the Exco does an update on various things, and that support and advice. There's some humour in there, but the advice isn't just about economic. It's about health and well-being as well, because we're very cognizant of the health and well-being of people during what is such an abrupt change of way of life. I did a video a couple of weeks ago to give people tips and advice. Just no financial advice, but just say, look, did you know you could get mortgage relief? Did you know if you're working from home you can claim it on your tax return? Have you tried Money Supermarket? Those sort of things. And we ran a competition on that where people with the biggest savings, I gave them 50 quid worth of vouchers, and a number of people saved thousands of pounds. So that's gone down really, really well. And we've opened up a new employee hub on the internet, so people can keep in contact with each other, post stuff, and it's got its own pets corner as well. So that's gone down exceptionally well.
Yeah, you can never get enough dogs and cats at this time, can you?
Exactly.
Phil, what can dealers do at the moment to minimise the impact on their business, do you think?
I mean, yeah, the stuff that Neil, Richard, and David talk about is right. You know, you immediately do what you can to reduce your cash outflow, and you know, unfortunately, people are kind of one of those biggest lines. And you know, I'm really pleased that the government put the furlough scheme in place. I mean, I think there's some realities in how it actually gets implemented, but you know, Dave had to work pretty quickly, and so that it's a massive undertaking. You know, sort of stuff you don't see in terms of world wars. The most important thing to do is remember that there will be a business to come back to, and you know, consumer inquiries are not down as much as you would think. There's still traffic on our website, and you know, obviously going into lockdown, you know, it fell pretty dramatically, but we're running around sort of 35 to 40% down on leads, on looking kind of year on year, which is like, it's staggering in that that's a big number, right? Normally, you know, I'd be so depressed around that number, but it's also a staggering amount of people who are still making contact, because actually more than ever, they want to have the conversation with the dealer. They can't just go and walk in like they would do previously. And, you know, so some of our stats, you know, only about 24% of people are actually kind of probably really cancelling their car buying. They are kind of postponing or willing to wait until lockdown ends. So there's still an enormous amount of activity. You know, I was chatting to Neil the other day, you know, about delivering a car to a key worker. There is always going to be an underlying level of demand, and it's about supporting dealers as we come out of this, because you're going to be in this fascinating situation where there's going to be a burst of demand. We've seen that in Germany. We've seen a kind of real kind of recovery. There is still supply in the industry, but you know, there's not the kind of the wholesale channels on set up, and there's just the capacity as dealerships start reopening. And you know, do you bring back all your staff at one point? From our point of view, it's about making sure you've got people who can speak to consumers and give them reassurance. And the simplest tip is to provide some of that reassurance in your vehicle descriptions. So when your cars go across any of the classified sites, including your own website, it says, we will do home delivery if you do. We will kind of clean the car. We are able to offer social distancing. We are able to offer solo tires. Just provide those kind of basic reassurances, because that's what consumers are going to want. Even though they'll know deep down that's what will be. You just got to over communicate.
Yeah, great advice. I think it's about allaying any fears, really, isn't it? But I think, like you've all said, really, everything feels like it's on pause at the moment, doesn't it? And that is where the government has to come in to a certain degree. How do you fit, Neil? Do you think the government's doing enough for the automotive industry?
I think, if I'm going to be fair to the government, they are trying to do the best by every industry they can. I think conversations that have been going on over the last couple of days about what's acceptable in terms of a click and collect scenario, what's acceptable in terms of having almost a locked door policy on a showroom and inviting consumers in one by one to collect a vehicle with social distancing and sanitisation. I think what would be useful is some more clarity. It may be difficult to get that, and I think what they're suggesting on opening garden centres and B&Q now, allowing people in, still social distancing. I mean, are these essential services? Probably not. I mean, I'll be totally honest, in the last 6 weeks of lockdown, we've delivered 43 cars to key workers. We've had key workers ring us and say, I've smashed my car up, I'm a paramedic, I've got to get to the hospital, will you sell me a car? We've worked with social distancing, we've worked with all the sanitisation guidelines, and we've handed those vehicles over, either on delivery or at not one of our sites, but from our head office facility or something like that. I struggle to see what the issue is for us to be able to invite or appoint an individual who's transacted online to one of our showrooms to pick up a vehicle, as long as we are clearly following all of the social distancing guidelines, sanitisation, etc., etc. The door for the showroom would be locked. There would be probably one individual or two individuals in the showroom, one person in allowed at a time, and that would be on an appointment basis. I struggle to see how that is being less responsible than allowing people to wander around a garden centre. So that's the only area I'd like to have some clarification. And conversations going online last night, there are certainly arguments either way that can be made for or against. There is that there is a grey area and there's a lack of clarity, and that you can go through the regulations and you can make an argument for it just as well as you can against.
Absolutely. Going back to the finances side of things, David, what financial support is available for dealers right now?
Well, obviously the furlough was the big one with the staff contribution, which I think the majority of motor business will have taken advantage of. I'm not sure there are any motor businesses that I'm aware of that have remained open and haven't furloughed a significant proportion of staff during the period. There was obviously the VAT freeze, which has been helpful, and a number of other measures around tax and things like that, which has been well received. And then there's the coronavirus business interruption loans, which again, I think going back to Neil's point earlier or before, there's been a lot of uncertainty around that. When it was initially announced, there was a limit of 45 million turnover. That got increased to 500, and then subsequently it's been lifted from 500. So a lot of motor businesses quite quickly get into 45 or even 500 million of turnover based on the value of the stock that they're selling. Now, we've had very, very mixed experiences with assisting people on this. Some of the banks and funding partners out there seem to have good clarification on the process and some really quick turnaround on approval of monies. Others still seem to be finding their feet, and it's challenging because actually their following process, they've had to put something in place that was never in place before within a 2-week period. I think some of the red tape has now been removed, so it is more accessible, this money, but it's still hard because ultimately you've got to demonstrate that the business was viable before and that it can be viable again after this. And unfortunately, we operate in a business where the margin of error between, or the percentage margin between profit and loss is very, very slim. And I think it's a space where the financial institutions do get very, very nervous around this piece. So hopefully people will be able to access this money. OEMs might have to come to the party as well. But it's the worry we have is what the cash burn coming out of this looks like, because actually with the overheads and unfurloughing people, but maybe not having anywhere near the volume of traffic through the businesses to start with, what does that actually look like from a cash perspective? Because I think it's a brave person who thinks that as soon as lockdown's lifted, we're going to hit 100% of inquiries again, and people are going to be flooding. Well, they're not going to be allowed to flood through the dealership doors with social distancing, but the consumer is going to be wary of what the impact will have been on them personally. And I think it's going to be a very interesting time. A lot of people seem to be of the opinion that used cars might be quite buoyant on the back of it. So that might be great news for Neil if his stock's not depreciated as much as perhaps he was thinking it might at the beginning. It's also going to be very interesting to see what the OEMs do with regards to new vehicles, especially some of the premium brands who are very heavily set up around new vehicle profitability, making the businesses viable with some significant overhead. So, yeah, interesting times. I think our advice is take advantage of the cash that's available to you during this. So if it's available, even if you don't need it, it's potentially worth considering, because looking at the rates, some of the rates that this money is available is actually quite competitive and compelling. So certainly worth looking at. And if anybody wants any assistance, just give us a shout. Yeah,
it's all about, as you say, leaning on government support, but also doing what you can yourself, isn't it, during this period? Richard, what would you recommend dealers do to manage their finances during this lockdown period?
I mean, it's a lot of it's been said. I mean, it's looking what's out there. So you know, first and foremost for us, you know, safeguarding the future viability of the business and our colleagues' safety is paramount. So all decisions we make revolve around that, and then it's just tapping into what's available, and that could be the job retention scheme, the rates holiday, the VAT deferment, etc. I think my experience has been the brands that we work with have by and large been very supportive. Partners that we work with have been very supportive. And I think there's a general sense of pulling together to help through this. we have put in strict controls around cash forecasting, payments, costs, and look to minimise everything we can wherever possible during this shutdown period. One thing I would say though is when it comes to our supply chain, any invoice that was on the ledger and approved, we paid because we didn't think it was appropriate to withhold payments from our supply chain. Now, there are some suppliers that have said you don't need to, but by and large, we've carried on paying our suppliers if the invoice is on and approved, because obviously we've furloughed a lot of our accounting centres now, so we can't process more. And then I think Dave's point's absolutely right. It's looking at when we come back, it's sort of a little bit easier when you're in this benign period. It's shut down, so it's a bit easier to manage your cash flows, your funding, your vehicles rolling on, rolling off, because nothing's really happening. When the doors open, then that's going to be a little bit more difficult, more difficult, because you're going to have to make a decision about who you on furlough, when you're on furlough. Vehicles are going to start coming in, coming out, and having robust controls in place and cash flow forecasting for when we reopen is more critical in a way, because that's where it's going to be more volatile, and that's what we're focusing our attention on, and we've put in place some robust processes to ensure that we've got that visibility.
Yeah, I think what happens next is the biggest question, really, isn't it? On the subject of questions, we get a lot of questions into the show, far too many to cover on a single show, but we've picked out a few just to ask you guys today. The first one comes from Karen Hurlston, who's actually been a guest on the show herself previously. She asks, will the sales process move online, and will classifieds continue to spike in website traffic as a result? Phil, I'll throw that one to you.
So yeah, I think the rate of adoption of buy online services in the last 6 weeks is kind of, just gone through the roof, and it's fantastic, right? Actually, in terms of that opportunity, there's few kind of like nuggets of positivity in this, but this has forced people to embrace change that's been on the cards for ages. So Neil's been pontificating about this for ages. We've long held a belief that consumers want to do more online. Whether they want to fully transact online, they definitely want to do more online. They want to spend less time in the dealership. They want to be more empowered when they get there. So the fact that dealers are being forced to think differently about this, and the social distancing measures that are inevitable, will mean that becomes more inevitable. So asking the consumer to upload a video from home of their part exchange, or being able to complete some of the finance paperwork online, that's all going to become part of the ordinary process, which is great. The role of classifieds is probably slightly more important during this period as well, because you're not going to have walk-ins, so it's really important to make sure you've got that visibility of your stock. And yeah, we've already seen it in other markets. So say Germany's coming out of lockdown, and we're seeing spikes in traffic and that pent-up demand. So I think the one positive thing is that we are all going to be forced to think about how we support car buying during this process, and it takes us on that inevitable road of trying to help the consumer do more of it at home.
Yep. We've had another question from Chris Ashton Green, which relates to OEMs. I know OEMs have come up quite a bit during this conversation, and he asks, what should dealers and OEMs learn from this current situation regarding their current business model? David, I'll throw that one to you.
I suppose the lessons to be learnt from it are perhaps were businesses going into this carrying a bit more cost than they needed to. I think if we look back at the 08-09 scenario with the recession, then a lot of businesses realised that they were carrying costs that perhaps because they were in reasonable profitability, there were some things that were in them which didn't need to be. So again, from this predicament, does it refresh people on that view and cleanse out some of those things that have crept back in? What else can you learn from this? I suppose keeping control of stocks. And I suppose the other thing that's unprecedented, but people have had to react to, is the speed of change. And I think a lot of businesses have reacted extremely well. And I think it's equally important that people react as quickly coming out as they have going in, because I think Richard's right. It's a complete unknown what this new reopening might look like, but those businesses that react and are responsive as quickly as they can be to the hopefully ever increasing inquiries and footfall will be those that probably succeed out of it.
Absolutely.
And finally, cash. I suppose having cash around you and managing your business and your cash flow at all times will help businesses survive.
Great question, isn't it? We've got one more question, actually, which I think is pretty kind of ties in what we've been saying throughout this, really, which comes from Alistair Jeff. And he says, the DVLA has confirmed that car buyers can take unaccompanied test drives using trade plates. How will this affect the sales process, Neil? And does it kind of link in with what you guys have done already to sell cars during the lockdown?
And prior to that, we our insurance allows us to send individuals out on unaccompanied test drive, as long as we get the relevant proofs and documents and all that prior to the test drive. And when we were experiencing busy Saturdays 5, 6, 7 months ago, where consumers were having to wait and customers were having to wait for someone to become available, we tested this and it worked well. And it only came to light through the NFDA probably 2 weeks ago when I was chatting to them that the DVLA had a problem with that in terms of the possible stealing of trade plates, or our biggest concern was the stealing of the car, not the trade plate. If I'm honest with you, someone driving our car away without anybody in it is a big problem. But yeah, and again with social distancing, it's not good enough now to say, well, the sales exec has to sit in the back and you sit in the front. That's not 2 meters. So I don't think they had an option really, and we welcome it. As long as we carry out our due diligence and we know that is a certified customer with all the right documents and proofs and driving license and whatever we ask them to bring in, then we don't have an issue with it. And now they've confirmed that's okay, we will certainly be pushing forward with that.
Excellent. It's about adapting, isn't it? That's the key thing. I think you've all pretty much said that throughout this episode. Guys, we've run out of time. I know we could talk about COVID for the rest of the week if we had the time, but we unfortunately haven't. Thanks so much for coming on. I know it is a very, very busy time for you all at the moment, and we really appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers, Bart.
And that just leaves it for me to say thank you for watching or listening wherever you might be. If you can subscribe on YouTube, we really appreciate it. And if you can click the little bell icon at the bottom of the screen, that will give you a little notification whenever we post a new show. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.